Díomh Cordia Gael. I hope you can all hear me this evening. I want to apologise, first of all, for how late we are on coming on stream. There was a vote in Leinster House which obviously put the kibosh on our original start time. And then now we have been cursed by a technical difficulties, which has meant that Eamon can't join us tonight. He apologises. It's not Eamon's fault. It's the technology has let us down. And he has said that he will join us in a future discussion in a couple of weeks' time. So he sends his apologies, and I apologise to you as well for not being able to bring the bill promised, unfortunately. But this is technology. Sometimes it is a wonderful thing and helps you in get your message across, and other times it stuffs you like it has stuffed us tonight. So major apologies on that. But listen, I want to just maybe discuss the two or the three major issues that we had on the discussion anyways, and maybe talk to people around them. And I might start at the bottom of that list, which is Moore Street. And many people will be aware of what's happened in Moore Street over the last number of years, and many people will be unaware. And I just want to kind of bring it to your knowledge. Moore Street is a major battlefield site. It was the location of the last stand of the volunteers that fought in the GPO in 1916. It's a location where volunteers came under enormous gunfire, machine gunfire, risked their lives and lost their lives on that street. It was the last headquarters of the provisional government of the Irish Republic and the final council of war. And you know, it's incredible that in many ways, Moore Street was the birthplace of the Irish state. And I find it interesting that every single minister in every single government since 1916 owes their position within the Irish state to what happened in that battlefield. It obviously was the precursor of Irish independence. And it's incredible to me that ministers who take a salary and who work and who have executive power on the basis of that sacrifice still in this country have not seen fit to make sure that Moore Street is remembered properly. So what is Moore Street like now? You'd imagine that this place of enormous importance would be central in the lives of Ireland. And also it's important to say that Moore Street is very rich in the architecture of Irish society. It's very rich in the culture. When I was a kid growing up, you know, the Moore Street markets were synonymous with Dublin. If you wanted to choose an image that represented Dublin more than any other image, you would choose that image of the traders in Moore Street having the banter and the crack with locals, selling their produce as well. So here we have a location which is just off O'Connell Street at the center of our city. And that location is now derelict. That location is a place where traders are finding it very difficult to trade. There's enormous levels of antisocial behavior. And it's a place where people drink and take drugs. It's a place where people urinate and defecate. And our response as a society to the birthplace of the Republic, 100 years more, 104 years now after that battle, is to leave it fall into dereliction. And actually, there's another battle happening in Moore Street in recent times, and that's the hangover of the Celtic Tiger. So in other words, we have a battle between many men and women who have been fighting for recognition of that site as a national monument, battling with large property developers and vulture funds who simply picked up these locations for their own material benefits, seek to develop and design them without any sympathy to what happened in the location, and seek to make as much profit from them as possible. And actually, there was a court case, as many of you would have known, and in that court case, Max Barrett said that Moore Street was a national monument. And if it's a national monument, well then development in that area has to happen in sympathy with it. And first of all, I want to give a heads up and respect to the many campaigners who have probably single-handedly, so far to date, prevented the developers within the Moore Street area from completely trashing the area and building their glass and plastic shopping centres on top of it. People like James Connolly Hearn, Patrick Cooley have led the campaign there for a large number of years. And indeed, because of their work, there's still the remnants. The physical streetscape is still there. Many of the buildings are still there. And we can touch, we can see, we can walk through the doors that the volunteers and the heroes of 1916 touched and walked through way back then. So the court case basically initially said that it was a national monument. And strangely enough, the political system basically appealed it to the Supreme Court to say that it wasn't a national monument. And we've had this battle, this inertia, this ever since. Now, governments, for the last number of years have set up a whole lot of different reports. They have set up committees. They have set up forums. They have set up every single thing going to kick the issue into touch and to try not to have a decision go the way of the campaigners and try to push their own particular decision. And yet, we still have that level of dereliction there. We've had a committee there recently, and that committee made a recommendation, but those recommendations have never been implemented. And it breaks my heart to see the level of dereliction there. Also, I have to say, in recent times, there's been further excavations of the location. And actually, we don't just have the history of 1916 and the history of the centuries previous to that. They have found a midden in Moore Street, and that midden has uncovered about 7,000 historical and archaeological objects. A midden, as you might know, is a place where in medieval times and previous, the materials that were unwanted were put into that area, which means that you have a rich source of materials that show how people lived in those times. And I've asked the previous Minister for Heritage to give us the documentation, to give us the reports on that midden, and they have been withheld. So there has been a battle, a massive battle for the heart and independence and freedom of this country in Moore Street. There still remains a battle between the campaigners, the developers, and the governments on one hand over the future of Moore Street. And as a result, we don't have the opportunity come to fruition that could be there. So obviously we in Aontú are on the side of the campaigners. We want to see the state actually CPO the area now at this stage. There is a large investment vulture fund in ownership. That vulture fund got bailed out, I understand, by the 75 million euros in recent days by the British state. It's unlikely to be able to bring the development to the necessary standard that demands of it. And what we're calling for is the state to CPO. The state already owns a number of buildings. The state could go in there and it could renovate and bring back those buildings to where they were historically. And it could allow for those buildings to be brought back to the minutes of Easter week 1916, if the state had the will or the ambition for the people. But unfortunately, that's not there. There is a new government. There is a new minister. That minister brought about a bill previously. We're hopeful that the view of this new government hasn't changed from when it was in opposition. I brought a bill a number of years ago to simply identify that Moore Street was a national monument. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, Sinn Féin all stated that it was a national monument, but when it came to it, the establishment parties wouldn't vote for my bill to make it a national monument. And here's the thing in Irish politics that's really, really important. It's really important. What happens oftentimes is the politicians say one thing, they'll go out to the Leinster House gates and they'll put their arms around the campaigners, they'll get the photographs taken, they'll make the speeches, they'll hit their fists against the table. But when it comes to actually voting, when it comes to putting their votes where their words are, where their mouth is, where giving the budgets necessary to achieve the objective, so far, to date, the establishment have been missing in that. And I think that's absolutely wrong. And we need to hold the establishment parties to account on that issue. I also want to talk about the Irish language, and I'm going to do this, if I can, bilingually. So if you don't have Irish, I'd ask you to maybe hold on to the next section, which will be in English as well. So first of all, the Irish language is one of the oldest written languages in the world. The Irish language was a written language, was a vernacular language well before English was even thought of, before English appeared on the map. Actually, up until Queen Elizabeth I of England, Irish was spoken in equal measure with the English language. It's only when the English started to build colonies in the States and elsewhere did the English language go ahead in numbers with regards to the Irish language. The Irish language it's like a massive treasure trove of cultural jewels with regards song, with regards literature, the stories of who we are as a people exist in the Irish language. And actually, I think it's a very sad thing at times. It's like a magic door. For so many people, if they don't have the language, they find it hard to gain access into that room with all of that cultural, I suppose, value that exists there. The Irish language is also a community language. It's a language of business, it's the language of families, it's the language of enterprise, school, education. It's the language of love, it's the language of anger, it's the language of football and soccer and hurling. It is a living language, and it has been a living language for maybe 3,000 years. But we are at a really important stage of the Irish language. It is possible that we are the last generation of Irish being spoken as a community language. Think about that for a second. It is possible that the next generation will come to us, our grandchildren, and they'll say, Peadar, do you remember when Irish was spoken as a community language? And we will have to say, yes, we do remember at that time. And they'll say, well, why didn't your generation do something about it when it could? Because it's like the ad, when it's gone, it's gone. And while the language will always continue in some level of cultural artifacts, it can be rolled out by the state to show some level of heritage, etc. It could also operate in networks around the country of individual families or individuals speaking online or on a phone or when they meet each other. But when a language ceases to be a community language, it changes radically in nature. The Gaeltacht, where it is a community language, is a rich well of the language. It has a depth of expression and vocabulary and ability to speak that just doesn't exist anywhere. So when that Gaeltacht ceases to operate, there's a difficulty. Now, one of the reasons why the Gaeltacht is under pressure is, first of all, the state won't allow people with the Irish language speak their language with the state. So they ask you to learn the language for 13 years in school. They want you to get to a proficiency in the language. But when you leave school, you look to speak to the state in the language. Well, that's no good. The state doesn't want that to happen. It's in very few spaces will allow it to happen. There is a Commissioner Teanga, an Irish language commissioner in this state, and that Commissioner Teanga has stated over and over and over again that the government is breaking their own laws with regards to provision of the Irish language. Now, the provision of the Irish language by the state doesn't need to cost any money whatsoever. You can employ a person who can speak Irish and English, and that person can deliver services in Irish and English. And you can do it to a certain percentage so that there is no cost to the state whatsoever in the provision of the language. But the state is refusing to really get to grips with employing people in the language. So when you pick up your phone, you want to pay your taxes, you want to get in contact with social welfare or any of these types of things, and you look to do it in the Irish language, you simply either won't be able to do it or it'll be made so difficult that you simply won't try to do it on a second occasion. So that's the first thing to do. We need to make sure that speakers of the language who pay their taxes like anybody else are able to speak to the state in the language. And the second thing we need to do is we need to help families who raise their kids in the language. If a child learns it from the cradle, there's no effort in learning it. It's no pressure, stress, and they learn it at a far higher level than at any other way you can teach them. And there's practically no funding in place to help families to do that whatsoever. And in the Gaeltacht areas, there's less infrastructure, there's less business, there's less jobs. And so people are forced to, we're in the dark here now, people are forced to go to other places for jobs. And when the government does bring jobs into the Gaeltacht, what happens is they often bring jobs that are English-speaking jobs into the Gaeltacht. When there's housing developments like the one in Rathcarn in my own constituency at the moment, what happens is the state allows for a large percentage of those houses to be bought by English speakers. And it's not that people don't want English speakers to live in the Gaeltacht, but there's a very interesting dynamic that happens when English speakers move into the Gaeltacht. The language shifts into English. It's like if you're in a pub and there's 9 people at the bar all speaking Irish, and another person walks in who can't speak Irish. It is the natural reaction of the people at the bar to flip to the English language, not to exclude the guest or the friend or the person who's walked in, and that has an effect of making the language very, very difficult in that area. So what we need to do is make sure that families have the supports necessary to raise their families, and that the Gaeltacht has jobs and ability for people to earn a living in there through their own language as well, and that we actually make sure that the housing developments that happen in there are suitable for families in Irish. And to be honest, I would see a lot of Gaeltachts that are beside urban areas: Rathcarn, Ballyvourney in Cork, on Rin in Waterford, and on Spadale in Galway. These are within commuting distance to large urban areas where there's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of people who raise their families in Irish in many of the cities who, have given half the chance, would love to move out to the countryside, to the Gaeltacht, where there's good schools and football clubs and shops and churches and everything else. And the Minister for the Gaeltacht could decide to create a list where people in that situation could create an expression of interest that they would like to move to that area. If there's 10 or 15 or 20 people who want to move to Rathcarn or to Onrin or Ballyvourney, the state could build those houses for those individuals and sell them at cost price or market price to those families, thus relieving pressure in the cities in a housing crisis, and also growing the language that's spoken in the Gaeltacht as well. So Tadesh aglinne mar gluan antanga a cumad umlón bio ag an gluan seo. Ach leis an iarnará cosúla Moore Street, níl semdá leid I mothúram ag na pórtaí móra sa tír seo sa teanga. You know, bíonn siad ag tuairt an béal bocht don teanga, bíonn siad ag rá go bhfuil simachú sa teanga. Ach an áiríre de gná, bíonn siad ag anamnú duine gan Gaeilge fiú chun bheith mar ara na Gaeltacht. Agus an duine leis an freagracht an Gaeltacht. De gná bíonn an duine sin ní bhíonn siad ina ara umlán, bíonn siad ina an ara seoiseach. So ní bhíonn an cuacht acu chun an job a dhéanamh. Agus caiimiid a rá in áiríre, tá an méid ólas istí I dteach lein mar an Gaeilge, tá sé uafásach ísisiú, and tá sé do creite. Tá Christa an dá se caite bhí mé héin bhí éim na cuimh agus bhí Catherine Connolly an cuiste sin, agus ní rá na pórtaí eile sásta teachta an cuiste. Uaireanta tháinig teachta dála ó Fine Gael, tháinig siad just chuna anam síú isteach, níor an siad le haid níos móna dean nóméid, agus níor héig siad churbe, cad bhí a gceist mar Gaeltacht nua a thógáil sa tír seo. Tá five eile an. Tá go leor tiismóirí sa tír seo tá siad ag éirí acuid fásaí a cheolú chuig na Gael scolanna. Dar leis na pobal breithine tá fés a chuig fan géad de tiismóirí sa tír seo ag éirí go mbeidh acuid fásaí ag freastal Gael scolanna. Cibéad Gael scolanna atá sa tír, tá chuig fan géad den na scolanna sa tír seo ina Gael scolanna. So, you know, being an rialtas agus an man commerceáide I gcónaí a caint faoi daoine ag rú an Gaeilge siar scórnach na níní, ach an áiríre an iarna tá an rialtas agus an man commerceáide tá siad ag brú an béarla síos scórnach na daoine. So fiú na páistí atá géirí, na tiismóirí atá géirí acuid fáistí a chur chuig na Gael scolanna níl deisiú é sin dhéanamh. Na daoine tá ag éirí acuid gnó a dhéanamh leis an stáit in Gaeilge níl deisiú é sin a dhéanamh churbe. Agus tá sé sin lufa I mothúramsa. So just saying there that 25% of the population of the state wants to send their kids to Gael schools. Only 5% of schools in this state are Gael schools. So you have a situation where the state and the establishment and the media talk about forcing Irish down the throats of people, but it's actually the flip. You know, kids and families that want to send their kids to a Gael school can't. They're forced to send them to English-speaking schools. Families who want to do their business with the state in Irish are forced to do it in English. So there's actually, and I laugh. They talk about, whether or not there should be compulsory Irish in for the Leaving Cert. The question should be, why is it that there's compulsory English at every stage of most people's lives when it comes to using a language? The truth of the matter is, we really have to get real now with regards the Irish language. It's part of the diversity of this planet. Every day a language dies. A language is a framework. It's a structure of thought and thinking. People think differently in languages, and if we see the death of Irish as a community language, I think it's going to have a very negative effect over who we are as a people, over our identity, and over, I suppose, our points of difference with the rest of the world. I will say to you, though, that for those who studied the language in school and maybe have lost the language in recent times, it's never too late to pick it up again. First of all, it's in your head, it's lurking around there, it just needs to be dusted off. The best way to do that, in my view, is to pick up a very simple Irish book, start to work your way through maybe a couple of pages of an evening with a dictionary. There's really good dictionaries online that make it very easy to learn. Try to talk to somebody you know at the same level as you in Irish on a regular basis. If you don't know anybody that speaks Irish at your level, there's usually a Circle Córa or some kind of class in your local town or village, and join that. And it's good crack, and there's a bit of social life to it as well. Try to listen to TG Cahir and Radio na Gaeltachta on a regular basis. And Dí Géir Níg, slowly but surely, your language will come back, your proficiency will strengthen, your opportunities you'll find to speak it also strengthen as well. The last issue that we have on the list here is obviously Irish unity. Now, we have a number of debates on Irish unity, just to bring people up to date about where we're at the moment. In Leinster House today, there was an ability for TDs to select, to nominate people to sit on the North-South Council. Very few of the parties actually selected anybody to do it. In the Dáil here, there is some level of debate. Obviously, Sinn Féin raised the issue on a regular basis. But I believe personally, from my experience in that party and that party's actions, the Sinn Féin, they don't understand the practical steps that's necessary to actually build Irish unity. They're great for having a conference, having a discussion, having a protest, etc. But they're not doing enough for the small practical steps that need to be taken. So I see the border as a wall with 1,000 blocks. Each block is an individual issue of major relevance to real people's lives. My view is, while we're waiting for a referendum on Irish independence, we should be looking to dismantle each one of those blocks. One of those blocks might be a cross-border health service. Another block might be a cross-border air ambulance service. Another block might be a cross-border enterprise service. Right now, InvestNI and the IDA are operating in cities around the world at double the price, competing with each other to bring foreign direct investment to Ireland. Imagine if we had the one organization, saving money with regards to footprints internationally and actually working together as an island. It would be more efficient. There's 101 ways that we can improve the lives of people, the efficiency of the country, the quality of the services that we experience if we do it together. Each one of those is a block that we can take down if we start to provide those services, and it will make that wall lower. On that sunny day when Irish independence happens, it means it'll be easier to achieve. So I would be, first of all, calling on the administration in the North and the South to start to look at that issue about building practical steps towards Irish unity very, very soon. There's other elements that we need to start working on. We in Aontú have brought about a bill which would give people in the north of Ireland, elected reps in the north of Ireland, rights to speak in Leinster House, both in the Dáil and in the Seanad. And there's nothing stopping right now MPs elected to constituencies in Ireland, in the north, from actually having speaking rights in Leinster House. There's nothing stopping it except the will of the people. We're looking for voting rights for people in the north of Ireland in the presidential elections. It makes no sense that you can be the president of Ireland and come from Warrenpoint, but if you're living in Warrenpoint, you can't vote for the president of Ireland whatsoever. We're also looking to, and this is an interesting thing, there's loads of committees happening in Leinster House. They don't necessarily get the major publicity that the other work of the main chamber gets, but a lot of good work happens in those committees. There is nothing stopping MPs in the north of Ireland sitting on those committees currently, which would allow them to focus on and representation of people in the north of Ireland in those committees. It can only add to our understanding of how to develop Ireland in a more cohesive, more organised way. I carried out an investigation about 3 years ago into the All-Ireland economy. It was the first such investigation in the state since partition. I interviewed over 100 people from all different backgrounds, from housing, from health, from education, from business, to farmers, to trade unionists, etc. And all of those individuals, no matter what community they came from, accepted that if we plan together, if we fund together, and if we deliver services together, those services will be better services. They will have a better effect on our lives, and they will cost less. So we need to focus about bringing that about now. We also mentioned the need for a New Ireland Forum, and that New Ireland Forum would bring about, civic society and political societies together so we can start working on those issues. We're delighted that the SDLP has taken up that idea as well, and they're running with it. That's fine. We have no problem when other political parties rob our ideas, as long as the ideas come to fruition. We notice that Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil are now starting to talk about that idea as well, and that's a good thing. There's no doubt in my mind that we are at a tipping point generation, whereby people realize through Brexit, through the extreme abortion laws that are happening in Westminster, and through COVID, that all Ireland integration simply makes sense. And people from a unionist community are coming to Aontú, are actually joining Aontú. They're very welcome. They will be listened to. They want to build an Ireland with us. We're happy to do that. We're reaching out our hands to people of the other community. Our party is about the idea of Wolfe Tone. It's about an Ireland of Catholic, Protestant, and dissenter, a pluralist Ireland where people can be exactly who they want to be, to their full potential, without fear or favour from the state. And let's build an Ireland that we can all be proud of. So listen, thank you very much for touching base with us tonight. Again, I do apologise, one, for the vote that was carried out, two, for the technical issue that happened that prevented Eamon joining us tonight. We will have Eamon back, and we thank Eamon for agreeing to get involved. I have to run down to the chamber now. We're involved with the regional group in bringing about a bill which would make it illegal for perjury. Imagine, in this country, there is no law, statutory law, preventing perjury. It's incredible. And what I would, if that bill comes true, it will have a major penalty. It'll make people think twice, with which we hope will reduce the cost of insurance for small businesses and for drivers around the country. I'd love to bring about a perjury law for Leinster House to stop the TD's line as well. It'd be great if you could fine a minister or a TD 100 grand for telling a blatant lie. That's another day's work. We'll get there in the future. Gur Mila Magat for participating tonight. We'll talk to you again soon. Slán